And now your host for the Prophecy Club, Stan Johnson.
Welcome to the Prophecy Club, where we provide information and resources with a prophetic warning message in souls to Jesus and to call people to repentance. Your topic today is the Elijah message, a very important message. We know that Elijah precedes the Messiah, but the question is, what is his message? How will Elijah's message appear? How does it relate to end-time events? Eddie Chumney explains what Elijah's second coming in the Spirit will restore. He's also going to answer these and many more questions about the prophecies of the last days. Will you help me welcome Eddie Chumney?
In Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, Jesus was asked, "What is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" For those of us who have open eyes and are knowledgeable of Bible prophecy, we know that we are living in the end of days, for these signs are all around us. The way in which the world is structured by the God of Israel is in accordance to his relationship with the nation of Israel. Presently, the nation of Israel is in exile. While the nation of Israel is in exile for breaking the commandments of the God of Israel, the nations of the world rule over them. What is the transition point when we have the fall of the nations ruling over the nation of Israel and the nation of Israel being restored? We commonly call that period of time the tribulation period. And the trigger event that happens in the tribulation period is when the land of Israel gets divided, Joel in chapter 3 and verse 2, which happens in a period of time that the Bible calls the day of the Lord. Joel chapter 1, verse 15, and Joel chapter 2 and verse 1. Also, the city of Jerusalem is divided. Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 2. And this also happens in the day of the Lord. Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 1. What is the fulfillment of this prophecy? It is through what I believe the creation of a PLO state, which we are going to see be created very near in the future, I believe. That is one of the major signs of the end of days and the coming of the Messiah. One of the others is the Elijah message and the ministry of Elijah. What is the Elijah message? What is his ministry? And what does he have to say in the end of days before the second coming of the Messiah? The Elijah message is mentioned in Malachi in chapter 4 and verses 4 and 5, as it is written. "Remember ye the Torah of Moses, my servant. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet." The message of Elijah in the end of days is to remember the Torah of Moses. The ministry of Elijah is a ministry of restoration. In Matthew chapter 17 and verses 10 and 11, Jesus was asked by his disciples, "Why is it taught by the scribes or the rabbis that Elijah must first come or precede the coming of the Messiah?" And Jesus answered and said unto them, "Elijah truly shall first come." He will come, talking about in the future. And what he is going to do is restore all things. Restoration is something that is brought about when the original thing, something has happened to it. And then you try to bring it back to how it originally was. What is that restoration that Elijah is going to come and preach and proclaim. It is a restoration in following Torah. In Isaiah chapter 42, in verses 21 and 22, it is written, "The Lord is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will magnify the Torah and make it honorable. But this is a people robbed and spoiled." Robbed of what? Robbed of the blessings of the God of Israel because they're not following Torah. They are all of them snared in holes. Blessings do not come. The nation of Israel is exiled in the nations, and they are hid in prison houses. They are for a prey, that is for the enemies of the nation of Israel, and none delivers for a spoil, and none says restore. It's interesting to note that in traditional Christianity, it is said, mainly through how the book of Galatians is commonly interpreted by traditional Christianity, that if you follow the Torah, that you put yourself in bondage. Here in Isaiah chapter 42, verses 21 and 22, we are told that the nation of Israel is in bondage or a prison house because they're not following the Torah. We can see how the Elijah message is a message of restoration unto Torah, or the path that the God of Israel wants his people